So our next presentation is from BioForest. We have Elsa and Allison.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having us here today. I'm Allison and this is Elsa. So together we hope to provide you a little bit of information about who BioForest is. In addition, some help that we may be able to offer about some forest pests. So, who BioForest is, we are a pest management company. We have various products available for use against forest pests, and we also have experience in doing forest health service surveying and detection surveys, and identifying and delimiting the insect populations and their effect on the forest. We actually, for those of you who may not know, have had a previous relationship with the Township of the Archipelago, doing some work with forest health surveys and citizen science in the area. So there's been that previous relationship with BioForest and the connection to Georgian Bay there. So what we're going to talk to you a little bit about today is we're going to focus on the introduced pine sawfly, specifically because it's kind of a hot topic right now. There's been present in the past and now current populations affecting the area, so we're going to discuss that a little bit. So learning, as Taylor had already gone through, the signs and symptoms of the pine sawfly. Treason, a little bit more about it. How does it work? How does it affect the insect? Other insects that it's available for use against. The benefits of using it, and kind of the whole process of what's a treatable tree, when can we start treating it, and who can apply treason, the product. So this will be a quick review as to the biology of the introduced pine sawfly, but it is a non-native pest that originates from Europe. It was first found in North America around 1914, but the first Canadian population was in 1931 near Oakville, Ontario. So since then, the populations have spread. In 1970, there were the low levels of the pest on pines in Fort Frances and Sault Ste. Marie region. The pine sawfly itself favors 5-needle pines, so of course our white pine is its preferred host, but when it comes down to it, it will affect other 2-needle pines and any ornamental or nursery stock trees as well. The white pines in Georgian Bay in particular did suffer from severe defoliation and even mortality in the early 90s due to this forest pest. There were pocket outbreaks in 2003, 2009, and again in 2015 along Highway 69 and around the Point of Barrel area. So looking at the past outbreaks and now moving forward into the current year, what we've kind of learned and where we're going to be at with this species. So the life cycle, just again an overview from what we've talked about today, what makes this devastating or can be devastating insect is it's 2 generations per year, giving it at least 2 times that larvae is out actively feeding on the foliage of the trees. The females lay eggs on the needles, and they usually lay about 10 eggs per needle, and the insect itself carries around 70 eggs in general. The larvae are that characteristic that we saw in the previous slide, that characteristic gray larvae with a shiny black head with yellow, gray, and black dots on it, and as it gets older it will develop 2 stripes down its back for identification. So the older larvae, the thing about what makes this so devastating to the trees is the fact that the first generation of larvae usually feed on the previous year's needles, and then when the second ones come out, as Taylor talked about, they can feed on those older needles but then also merge into the newer ones at the end of the season. So it causes defoliation throughout the tree, and usually it happens from the top down, and so this can result in branch mortality if it's been completely defoliated, and that in itself can then end up causing severe mortality in the tree itself. So often it is just defoliation, but with an infestation that is more advanced, it can cause tree mortality. And another thing to note about the species is that it doesn't rely on a tree being already stressed. It can attack healthy trees or stressed trees, it doesn't matter.
So we'll go over a brief overview of what treason is made of and how it works. and how it can be used to control IPS. So treason is a botanical systemic insecticide with an azadirachtin formulation. It was developed by CFS, the Canadian Forest Service, in collaboration with BioForest, and it can be used on deciduous and coniferous species against a variety of insect pests. So what is azadirachtin really? So azadirachtin is an extract from the neem tree seed kernel. It shouldn't be confused with neem oil. Neem oil is more, it's what you get when you press the fruit and the seed. This is really an extract of the seed kernel itself. And it's toxic to a wide range of insect pests while being very low in toxicity to birds and mammals. Treason has been labeled for organic use by the Organic Materials Review Institute. And OMRI is an organization that supports organic integrity by developing clear information and guidance about materials so that producers know which products are appropriate for organic operations. So this is really neat. We're really actually proud to have this on our label because it's a pretty good designation and tells a little bit about how good our product is. So treason controls sawfly populations by inhibiting their larval development, effectively decreasing the amount of foliage consumed. So once a larva, or in this case the caterpillar, starts to consume needles from a treated tree, it'll be unable to continue its natural course, and it'll be unable to cocoon and molt into the sawfly itself. So treason is registered in Canada and the United States for treatment against sawflies, including but not limited to birch leaf miner, pine false webworm, and introduced pine sawfly. And a low dosage of treason is required to effectively control sawflies. So as you can see here, for sawflies, we're looking at a dosage rate of 1 milliliter per centimeter of DBH, whereas the emerald ash borer, we're looking at a higher dose because it's so much more resilient. And other insects of note in sort of the Georgian Bay area, we're looking at gypsy moth, tent caterpillar, jack pine budworm. All of these insects can also be treated with treason. So BioForest initiated 2 efficacy trials against birch leaf miner, which we saw was a type of sawfly, in Sault Ste. Marie using a dosing rate of 1 milliliter per centimeter of DBH. And when post-assessments were done, results showed that compared to non-treated trees, the defoliation was greatly reduced, and just as much as 95 to 97%. So all species of sawflies can be treated with treason at a dosing rate of 1 milliliter per centimeter, which is directed on the treason label. There are quite a few scientific articles that discuss treason's efficacy and environmental profile, including this paper by Dr. Cousineau about treason's environmental safety. Dr. Cousineau says that foliar concentrations in senescent leaf materials are likely to pose very little risk of harm to decomposer invertebrates, meaning that the minimal treason residues found in the needles do not pose a high risk of harm to beneficial aquatic or terrestrial decomposers of autumn shed leaves if or when they do fall into lakes or streams. So what are the benefits to using treason? Well, there's no signage required. Treason is a class 4 pesticide. Applications of other insecticides, most notably class 2 or 3, will require a sign to go up prior to injection. That's not the case for treason. It has a non-restricted label, which means that it doesn't need to be used in conjunction with a municipal, provincial, or federal treatment program. So no permit is needed to apply treason. Treason is an injection, so it's wholly contained within the tree. There's no chance of spray drift into bodies of water, and the foliar residue is extremely minimal in autumn shed leaves or needles. So it has a pretty good sensitive environmental profile. When can we start treating for IPS? So treatments should start when 5 to 10 caterpillars are detected per tree, which in the Georgian Bay area could be late April to early May to even late May, depending on the weather. It's important to monitor these larvae populations annually, because as you know, populations outbreaks can happen very quickly, but they can also disappear just as quick. So if you're targeting the second generation, you should probably treat in late August. Unfortunately, our label doesn't allow for treatment past August 31st. Treatments should be done those last few weeks of August. Treatments of treason for IPS should be done once a year while the outbreak is alive. And it's important to target the young feeding larvae in order to limit the amount of damage done to the tree. Another option would be trying to manually remove or manually destroying the first generation of larvae on your pine trees so that you can treat for the second generation. The second generation is usually the most dangerous because it will consume the older needles as well as the newer ones. So who can apply treason? So treason needs to be applied by a registered BioForest service provider. And all our service providers are licensed pesticide applicators, and they're all experienced tree care professionals. They all have to follow a mandatory treason and ecoject system training session with us, and they should all be up to speed on how to treat for various insect pests. So what can you do? Okay, so keep an eye out on your trees, monitor very closely for signs of larva emergence. And when the populations are low and your tree, the larvae is easily accessible by hand, it's important to control those by removing them by hand or by, as we said, water spraying with a pressure hose. Also, share your experiences with other cottagers. They might come up with a different solution, a different idea. It's important to communicate and tell each other what works and what doesn't. And play your part and don't move firewood. I think that's a big message that we have to keep conveying is, whenever we move firewood, we have the chance of spreading insect pests. And so we should stop that in its tracks while leaving the firewood where it is. Thanks for your time.